Scientists unite to we solve a Vengi in this
Math
fight
scientist.
together.
Hello guys, today we're going to talk about for loops in Java. So last time we talked about if statements, which were a way to choose what kind of code, what code you want to run and when it should run. Now we're going to talk about for loops, which are ways to repeat code multiple times, maybe for different variables, but repeating the same piece of. Now, why would you want to do this? So when you're writing code, it is important to write code that is it usually does the same thing multiple times, but with changing situations. For example, checking whether maybe whether the whether the a sensor has sensed something, checking anything might need to do it multiple times. So you don't have to write code that would do it every single time you write the same piece of code to say print this, then you say the same code, print this every single time. So how do you use for loop? So the structure of a for loop is simple. Just write for inside the brackets and create a variable, give it a name. I is a common name that people just use, but you're not bound to just using I. You write a condition for when the loop, how many times the loop will run, or the loop will run until what condition is met. Then you write an iteration statement. So what does this? So it means we're creating an integer, equating it to 0. We're saying this piece of code should run until I is equal to 10, and each time we run this code, it should increase I by 1. So let's say each time this is happening, so system out dot print line prints what I is. And we run that. Okay. Nation. Okay. So as you can see, it printed out the number. Although the line of code is just one line of code that's saying print, it printed the number 10 times. It first printed out 0, then added 1 to 0, then printed out 1, then added 1 to 1, then printed out 2 until it got up to 9. Now, why did it stop at 9? It stopped at 9 because we said as long as I is less than 10. Now, the same conditions that work for if statements also work here. We can say I is less than or equal to 10. Means this time it will stop at 10. We can say, okay, so we can say I is not equal to 10. As you can see, we get the same condition we got the first time. So once it gets to a condition where you don't want it to continue, it then stops. It doesn't continue up to 11. Although 11 is not equal to 10, it doesn't continue up to 11. Once the condition is met, it stops the for loop. Okay, so a counterpart to this is the while loop. The while loop does basically the same thing, but with a different structure. Now we don't initialize our variable within the while loop. We have to create a variable outside. Let's say int I is equal to 0. Then inside the while loop, what we write is the condition. So let's say I is less than 10. Then within this, we want to print this. Now notice the difference is that in this situation, the structure of the whole for loop is not determined in here. We have to determine it externally. So we first determined what int I is, then we determined what the condition for it to stop is. Now the only thing that is missing is the iterate. You can say I plus. Now so I plus plus just means I by one value. You can even say there's another way you can say I plus equals to 1. This means that I added the new value of I is equal to the last value of I plus 1. So you're not limited as well to just 1. Say 2, to still to iterate amongst to add 2 every time. This time we're just going to use a plus plus. So we're going to remove this for loop. One has to do exactly the same thing but the for loop. Okay, so it did exactly what the for loop did, exactly the same thing. So we're going to change the iteration factor to 2. Time we should see that it's jumping, it's assigning I a value every 2 values. So we have half the numbers that we had. It's only taking the even number. So that's basically what how you use for loops and while loops in